week I read one article that assessed a whole new industry in Nebraska that had popped up around this, and it was like $1 million industry, giving lots of people jobs to be social workers to help these families that weren't necessarily families you'd consider that.
They didn't want help.
Yeah, they didn't want the help. Just to segue into that, I wasn't going to do this, but I think I'm going to share my own experience. Many of you know that I've been pretty outspoken about some things that have been unpopular in education, and this last year I decided to change what I was doing with my own kids' education, and we're doing school buffet style. That's what I call it. We're doing kind of a mix of things, so we're not 100% homeschoolers, and but I am doing some things at home. So I'm taking advantage of some of the public school programs, but in order to do that, I transferred my kids from the district we were in to another district, and that's what we're doing. Anyway, the second day of the year of school, so there was one full day of school, and the second morning of that, I was home with my kids and doing our thing, and I got a phone call from my truancy social worker. And I was quite surprised about that. I said, and it was from our former district, in fact, and so I asked her, well, how did you get my phone number? Because my work with Autumn, I happen to know the Utah truancy laws pretty well, and there's absolutely no reason I should have been on their radar in their system at any point, but an administrator at the school my kids were at had found out that my kids weren't coming back, and she'd heard that you were going to homeschool, so she had taken it upon herself, I guess, to check somehow if we had filed a homeschool affidavit, which I would have had to do if I were doing that full time. But anyway, I let her know that I transferred my school to a different district. They weren't in her jurisdiction anymore, and I let her know that after one day of missing school, even if all the other things she accused me of were true, I still shouldn't be on her list to be called. And I was kind. I hope I was kind. Like Autumn said, there's always that fear when someone's trying to interfere with your family. And so we got off, as we were getting off the phone, the last thing she said to me was, I hope for your sake that what you're saying is true. And that felt like a threat to me. And we don't have any of the most extreme laws. We've been fighting them for a couple of years, and they keep coming back with a little bit more power of these lobbyists and stuff. And so this year, we'd like to do something a little bit better than just trying to head it off, just trying to stop it. And Senator Al Jackson has filed a bill, Senate Bill 45, and it is to decriminalize truancy. So this is different, a little bit different than when Autumn was talking about absenteeism. We absolutely do not want a law that takes away parents' stewardship or their discretion to excuse their children. But there is, right now, the truancy is a Class B misdemeanor. And his bill would change that. It would take law enforcement, the judicial system, incarceration, that type of thing off the table for kids missing a certain number of schools, certain days. And we've started a Facebook forum here for Utah Attendance Poly discussions, and we're already starting to gather more stories even of what's going on. Parents of kindergartners. Kindergarten is not compulsory in Utah. Most people don't know that, but parents of kindergarten students are getting these letters. If you don't come talk to the principal, if you don't get your child's attendance up, then you're going to get a Class B misdemeanor. And most parents are quite stunned by that. The other thing I was stunned to learn that is in many of the schools, if you're just a little bit tardy, they'll count that as an absence for the whole day. So that can add up really fast for truancy issues as well. And the whole point is not to just thumb our nose at a system and not to say, you know, teacher's tough, you just have to deal with whatever you get. But that parents and teachers working together respectfully is more effective than getting law enforcement, these automatic letters that are generated by a system. I think we can do a lot better than that. And so I hope that we can get all of you here and more people to help us support Senator Jackson's bill. It doesn't mean there's no such thing as truancy. It doesn't mean we don't maybe track and reach out to the kids that truly need that, but it takes away a criminal penalty for that. And like Autumn said, even if you're forcing a kid to sit in a chair by force of law, or we're threatening his parents, is his presence in that chair really helping his education? You know, I hear the arguments, well, it's keeping him out of trouble. It can't just be running around. And you know, my little comparison for that is, what if your kid was late for curfew? Do you want the state to come in and get themselves involved with that? Or is that your responsibility as a parent to deal with that? And you could use the same arguments. Well, they could be out causing trouble around town or whatever. And I know there have been curfews for cities that were just general and things like that. But I guess it's a little bit more personal for me that they could use this threat against families that aren't asking for the help or necessarily needing that kind of help, and I think it's important. And now I'd like to talk just a little bit about some other parental rights issues. The key principle, and it's actually in the Utah State Constitution, that parents are the ultimate say on children. I don't know the exact wording, maybe you do, but it says that parents are the ultimate authority over their child's education, and the state is secondary and supportive to that. That's what's in our Utah State Constitution. That is a value that in our community we at least give a lot of lip service to. I would like to think that the majority of our community believe that is a really true principle, and yet there's a lot of policy that is at odds with that. One of the other things that we've been working on the last couple of years is with assessments. And Barbara mentioned that I was on the parent review panel for the SAGE assessments. And after seeing those tests, I opted my kids out of taking those assessments. And I don't think that they are a valuable measure of what's important in education. But because of funding and different things, it's been kind of tricky that when I opt my kids out, it affects, like Autumn mentioned, it could affect the teacher, it could affect their pay. And so we worked with Senator Osmond and got a law passed that gave safe harbor to the schools and teachers. It wasn't granting parents' rights, because parents' rights are natural. They pre-exist the law, right? I think this is a group that would understand that. So we didn't go to the state legislature and say, give us rights as parents. We went to the legislature and said, we're going to exercise our parental rights to not have our kids participate in something that we don't think is effective or healthy mentally for our children, and we don't want the good teachers that are working with our children or the schools to be punished for that. And so they changed the law that it allowed parents to opt out without that being counted against the teacher or the school. And that's been something that's been really misunderstood. I've heard even testimony on Capitol Hill saying that, talking about it as if the state had granted some rights to parents to opt out of tests, and really that's a right that exists, and we were trying to create safe harbors in the schools as parents exercise that right. Well, Merry Christmas to us. In December, just this past month, Senator Hatch co-sponsored the renewal of No Child Left Behind. The Every Student Succeeds Act. Huge difference. They renamed it No Child Left Behind, Every Student Succeeds, and they sold it in the media as this dramatic change that they've given power back to the states, and all those problems with No Child Left Behind have been fixed. Well, a group of parents and I, including Autumn, we took the 1,089 page bill and we split it up and we read it, the whole thing. It was released on a Monday afternoon and they voted on it Wednesday morning. 1,000 page bill. And I'm pretty sure no one who voted on that was able to read that or scrutinize that. But we read that and it didn't do anything that they said it did. And here's why. There was a lot of sophistry involved in the passing of this bill. And I'm going to use the assessments as an example. There's a section in ESSA that says, we will respect state law regarding opt-outs of testing. You think, yay, a win. And then in the other section of funding, it says, if you have a certain percentage of people opting out, you lose all of your funding. So what does that do? That creates an incentive for states to create a law to block the opting out of tests so that they can get their funding. They don't want to lose their funding, and that's what we see is happening. There's I've been searching, I've been kind of keeping an alert for a bill file to be filed, and I haven't seen the official bill file, so I don't have a number, but I know 2 legislators at least who are discussing it. Well, a senator and a legislator that are already discussing how they're going to revise the opt-out law that we have to, I feel like, reverse that. And like I said, I haven't seen the language yet, but that's the story that was in yesterday. There was a story about Craig Powell and the marriage amendments, and maybe a lot of you are familiar with that, but there's this little line in there where he talks about he's also going to be addressing parental rights. And my radar went up and I did a little digging, and so we're kind of keeping our radar out for this bill that will kind of push back against what we've been able to create in terms of the opting out of the assessments. And I'm not against assessments. I believe that there are tests that help the teacher and the parents understand what their children need and how they can help them, and I don't believe that's what this age assessment does. I don't know. One other thing that this experience over the past couple of years has taught me is that it's really tiring and exhausting and overwhelming to always be on the defense. And I have 5 kids at home, and I've taken full control of their education, and that's what I want to be doing. That's what I want my priority to be. And yet, I feel like a mama bear backed into a corner a lot of times where I can't even just close my front door and deal with my family. They're coming into my home and trying to make certain things happen. And I think that many of us have come to the conclusion that it's not enough just to keep pushing it back against these bills as they keep coming up year after year. I mean, how many years now? The absenteeism, it comes back and it comes up a little stronger, and it comes back a little stronger. And the victories are too short-lived, and we want to get on with raising our families. So we really, really need to focus on getting good men and women in the legislature. And I know there are many, but there's a few that seem to violate these principles of family and parental, parents being the primary stewards of their family and directing that more often than others. So I was hoping that it would be ready for today, but a group of us are drafting a statement, just a short list of principles that align with those types of things. Family-friendly policy. And what we'd like to do is craft that statement, and then I would like to invite all of you, and as many as we can round up from our other forums, to personally try to attend the town hall meetings of our representatives. I think many of the senators and representatives are holding pre-legislative session town halls, and see if they wouldn't sign that statement, kind of like a pledge or agreement. And then we're going to we'll report that, but then we're also going to track the votes. Like, there's many legislative trackers but we'd like to do a kind of an index based on if their votes are family friendly, or if they respect the primary role of parents, and the family is the fundamental unit of society. So I'll stay and gather names of people who might be willing to do that, but we'd like to get at least one person for every senator and representative in the state, and then report on that. And then, seems like there was one more action item, and I didn't write it down. So the town hall meeting and the ranking. Well, we just, I think that as I've gotten more involved in this, I've been a little bit discouraged by the apathy, and that there's a lot of people that just assume that if people share the same faith, or they're a good soccer coach or whatever, that they're voting according to their same principles. And I think that there's just a lot of people aren't aware. And until you start pushing back a little bit and someone gives you that threatening call, then maybe you're not as aware about it. But we'd like to raise awareness specifically in defense of the family. So, yeah, Margaret?
Well, it might be helpful to tell the audience here that Craig Powell and name some of the ones who are really against family values in a big way. Urquhart did a lot of damage, disrupting things with his legislation and activities. He created mutiny, having the public come up and put notes on the Senate door, which is not acceptable. But I mean, we just need to name those people.
Yeah. And that's what we'd like to do. But I'd like to do it in terms of, a specific, here's the principle, and here's how this specific legislation violated that principle, because that's the hard thing. These are good men. They're good fathers. They're good neighbors. I don't have a beef with them personally. I'd love to be their neighbor, and so it's not about someone being bad, but it's about someone voting consistently according to principles that aren't in alignment with respecting that stewardship, and the arguments are persuasive. As Autumn said, the arguments can be really persuasive if you're just listening to that, or if it's the teachers union coming to you and saying, well, you can't hold us accountable for the testing if the kids don't take the tests. And I agree. I don't think the teachers should be accountable for those specific assessment results. I think that the teachers should be accountable to the parents and the individual student. I don't think that kids are the product of school. I think they're the customer. But there's some really huge philosophical divides going on right now in education policy that are along those lines. Is there another?
Could you repeat the number and name of the bill?
It's Senate Bill 45, and Senator Al Jackson is the sponsor of that.
And name of the bill, if it's not too long.
I didn't write it down right here. It deals with, I think it's like decriminalization of truancy or something like that, but it leaves everything that how many days is truancy and stuff like that, but it takes away the Class B misdemeanor. Basically, we'd like to resolve these issues within the system of parents, local counselors, and people like that, and keep like law enforcement out of it.
I'm a retired third grade teacher from California, but I think the principle's true across the board, that we were taught or made to do, however you want to phrase it, to teach to the test.
Right.
So, I mean, you can say SAGE, I can say whatever it's called in California, but the principle's the same. So I'm teaching a particular lesson in reading, and I take that story and create questions that have the same directions that are on the test, so that they can recognize those directions and so that they can have some idea to it. So towards the end, I'm retired now, but I wasn't able to teach as much with cooperative learning and ways that really teach and internalize the concepts I wanted because of the demands that were put on me from the district and the principal of how I needed to do it in the classroom. In the past, I've been able to close the door and teach the way I wanted, phonetics and whatever I did, but it's not that way anymore.
No, it's not. My daughter was in third grade the first year of the SAGE tests. Loved her teacher, just a great, great teacher. And the first year they didn't have as much notice. None of the teachers ever saw the test, but the teachers became aware right before the tests that there was a kind of an essay portion of the test, and it's all done on computers. So he had to drop, my daughter's third grade teacher had to drop a whole unit, one that I was really excited about, a science unit. He had to drop the whole unit and teach third graders how to type. When did you take typing? When did you take keyboarding? My third grader, they were in the computer lab as often as they could for a week, dropping whole other units of study so that they could learn to type, so that they could do an essay. I gave a presentation on SAGE recently, and I showed at the third grade level. My daughter loves to write. She writes plays, books, that's just her thing. Not all my children have that gift, but she did. And I had this little book that she wrote. It was like a chapter book that she wrote at third grade. I can show you what she can type. It was a paragraph long, and it was really painful for her. Is that an accurate assessment of her writing or her language arts skills? It's not. And the SAGE test is really, even beyond that, even beyond the content issues that I had with the test, the whole format of the test, there are all sorts of glitches. I'm under non-disclosure. There was a gag order to be on the review theme, but I gave a whole presentation based on the public. There's practice tests that are public that parents can log into and take the tests. And I gave a whole presentation showing some of my concerns with the public items, and bottom line is, because of the combination of all those things, I don't think the SAGE test could in any way be an accurate measure of what kids can know or do, and definitely not how effective teachers are. But this is what we're seeing, and I don't know if there's any other parents in here who've had their kids go through the SAGE practice tests and stuff like that, but it's turned into they're on the computer, and the only thing a high score in SAGE test tells me is how much time they've spent training to take the SAGE test. If they know where the menus are, if they know, it's really, because I'm telling you, this interface design, my background is software. I worked for a software company before I stayed home with my family, and I'm telling you, there's no computer skills that these kids will learn using the SAGE test that will ever transfer to anything else, and there will be some bad habits that they may have to break. It's not, there's no standards in terms of that, but, and then we're holding our teachers accountable according to this test. Funding is based on this assessment, and it's a mess. And now, as we actually had some legislators starting to recognize this and be willing to do something about that, it's now at the federal level, it's enshrined in the Every Student Succeeds Act that we have to assess our children this way.
I'm glad we're turning to the whole tech side, because while we've discussed a couple of specific issues related to parental rights in connection with education, another thing that's popping up, and I wish I could give you that you need to do this because I can't figure it out myself, is the way that tech is coming into our schools and permeating it in a way that if you want to have a child receive a public education, you're pretty much not going to be able to escape them having a Google email address and using computers with software that gets tracked by vendors who have a non-disclosure agreement but designate themselves a, what do they designate themselves? A school official, educational agency or something, so that they can then actually sell that information elsewhere. I mean, there are little things such as every child who is I have 2 children in the public school system this year, and my 3rd grader and my 6th grader both receive a school email address. well, it's alpine dot such and such, but it's actually a Google account. Now, I don't know if you remember, but 3 years ago, there was a big furor over the fact that Google actually has rights to your emails. They can do whatever they want with your emails. They can search them. They can do what they want because it's a free service. You agreed to the terms, and in the terms, they can do what they want. That applies to our kids too. Now, people say, well, there's an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement involved there, but the reality is, and they've agreed not to market to kids while they're in school. But if they've got this address and it's not easy to triangulate and figure out who they are, and then they go and either use the address, say at the public library or from home, well, they can market to them there. And I've heard stories that they do. So just yesterday, I walked into the classroom to volunteer and help out like I do on Tuesday mornings in my son's class. And she's like, oh, we don't need you this morning, because they were all practicing typing for the SAGE test, except for my son, who was over there doing something on paper because he's not taking the SAGE test. And I thought, it's really a shame. I don't think that parents, I could be mistaken, but I'm not under the impression that school community councils got together and said, we need more tech. We want this and this and this and this. And I'm under the impression that it's kind of been pushed down on us and we're going, okay. And really, when it comes to parental rights, you go, so where do my rights end and theirs begin? If we in our home have a low-tech operating, you can play half an hour on the computer a day, or in our family it's like half an hour every 3 days a week. Well, then they come home and they have to do their homework on the computer. Well, what then? That's still screen time, right? It's concerning as we try to figure out how to navigate this technological tidal wave, that the technology in many ways is pushing families apart as parents don't have a say in how much access their kids might have to it, and what they can use it for, because their teachers have said they have to use it for this or for that.
Share an example of Heber.
Share a Heber example. I think she had something to say.
Oh, okay. So one of the moms that we work with, her kids were in a school that did one-to-one tech. They all got their little tablets.
Which means it's assigned specifically to them.
Every kid has a tablet, and they do their assignments are on it, their homework's on it, everything's on it. And the kids really quickly hacked around the settings and installed some kind of texting, chatting thing. Anyway, her husband got a hold of the tablet and realized that his son, in a 70-minute class, has sent and received 90 messages. Just chat, and he's like, how is this helping? And anyway, they decided to take the tablet away from him. Say if you're not going to be responsible with the technology, we're going to take it away from you. And she got a call from the principal and said, you can't do that. He has to have this for school. And here, this is where we come in. We come into these things all the time where you're saying, well, as a parent, this is important to me. I have my own experiences. Like I said, I'm a technology person. We use some technology for education. There's some really great resources and there's some less great resources. There's a lot of research about age appropriateness for screen time, even really educational, useful things, kids in front of screens a lot. It affects the amount of dopamine their brain releases. I don't know if anyone is familiar with that, but that's the chemical in your brain associated with addictions. And you wonder why we have a lot of kids with self-regulation issues and stuff like that. That's something, just as a parent, without any research that I'm aware of really keenly, if my kids are on the screens too much. And it got to the point where I realized unless I was doing more with my own kids' education, I wouldn't have a choice about how much screen time they were getting. One's a funny anecdote that's a positive thing. My daughter was taking an assessment for reading. And I don't know, some of you might be familiar with reading aids, and it's one that the state will pay for if the kids don't do well on a Dibbles test or anything. But someone said, oh, this is a great little program, it's fun for the kids. And so she took the assessment, and this is a kindergarten or younger daughter who, she knew her alphabet and was just starting to sound out. She knew all the letters and what sounds they made. Guess what level she tested on at reading aids? Well, they placed her at a 3rd grade reading level. And I sat next to her while she took the assessment, and they would ask a question, they would say, find this word, and they would keep going on, I'll find this sentence. And she would find the right sentence by the number of words that they'd said, and by just recognizing certain sounds in it. She wasn't really reading. I couldn't say, sit down and read this sentence to me. she couldn't do that, but she kind of gamed the system and was placed, and I actually had to call the company and say, actually, we need you to manually override the placement and put her back here where I know is the level that she is at. And so, you know, as we have more and more decisions being made by technology, even for teachers, and, you know, placing the kids, and everyone assumes that the kids are where they are because they're being assessed by these experts and all this fancy stuff. I just, the teachers know. They know before stage test, they know they know where the kids are. They know what they're reading, and they know, especially if we didn't, you know, our huge class sizes make that more difficult, but they know, the good teachers know, and I really would prefer to have still the parents and the teachers the key decision makers on that.
One more thought, and I'll sit down on this, but we know that children can learn well via the methods that have been used for thousands of years. Really, tech is exciting, but it's an experiment. We don't know if what's going on in their minds is going to allow them to learn the same way we did. We really don't. We don't know how tech affects that. As parents, I keep feeling like I'd like for us to talk to our districts about being more thoughtful about it and not just hopping on that bandwagon and taking it over the cliff. Being more thoughtful and careful. I don't know, it'll make a difference, but as you talk to school officials and such, I do anyway, I tell them, I'm concerned about this pace at which we're picking up the tech and how we're not really thinking through what's really the implication. And I'm concerned that it's going to interject this potentially wonderful tool between parents and children.
The other concern with tech, and Jaquel Sullivan has written a lot and researched a lot on the connections of this, but I think Texas is kind of a cautionary tale for this. So they had a program called C-Scope, and basically they decided that to get all the teachers on the same page with the curriculum, we're going to have a computer program that had all the curriculum, the lessons, and the teachers only could use the lessons that were in there, and no one could access, parents couldn't access it, and so they were completely controlling the curriculum for the whole state through a computer program, and parents couldn't see it. It was actually illegal to let a parent log on and see the lessons that their kids were logging on to, and hopefully we've avoided that so far in Utah, but the tech companies are aligned now with what we're calling it's called the White House Learning Registry. And basically it's a group that, you know, they're setting all kinds of standards. Common Core standards were really key for the tech side. That's my expertise, or my career was data. My company managed giant databases for publishing. Newspapers, magazines, websites, and data tagging was how we did it. You tag a certain story and it could go out to all these the same story could go and fit in all these different mediums and massive amounts of data. And when I saw Common Core, I recognized data attacks. There's other people that have confirmed that since, but we can't have these massive curriculum control, testing control systems unless everybody is tagging and using the same kind of standards for the data management. And now we have the White House Learning Registry that is kind of aligning this. So as the tech comes more into our schools, it's going to bypass the state school board, it's going to bypass the state legislature, it's going to bypass your local school board. The curriculum and assessment decisions are being made more outside, just through market forces, if you will, than anything else. And so I'm not anti-technology. Technology is my thing, but I'm a mom first, and I'll do whatever I feel is best for my kids in that regard, and I think that's a right worth protecting. You had a question?
I just wanted to make a couple comments so people know what's going on in Provo. But it is here. We had the same experience with one-to-one technology. Dixon Middle School here in Provo was they were the first school in the state that instituted the one-to-one technology. And so we dealt with that for 2 years while my kids were there. And as a result of that, no books, none. And so as parents, you talk about the technology disconnecting parents from their children. There was absolutely no way for us to see what our children were learning. There was no way that we could help them with anything at school because we did not have access. You say, is that already here? It is here. That we did not have access to their lessons. We could not see what they were being taught in school. And they would do their work in class and submit it in class, online. Nothing printed. We went to parent-teacher conferences. They had nothing to show us.
Parents get the numbers and their rankings and their scores, but you don't get to see them.
We couldn't see any of our children's work, what they were doing, what they're, where they were. Nothing. It was invisible to us as parents. And the other thing with attendance, I actually have my kids, we have a homeschool affidavit, but I have 2 high schoolers and they take a couple of classes at the high school. But we've got that homeschool affidavit. I have a daughter, she's a teenager, she has, her monthly issues, where she's missed 3 days of school. And I'm getting calls from the attendants. If she misses 1 more day, you're gonna have to come in. And they use fear big time.
Do they ask you how her grades are or how she's doing?
No.
It's just, they're there.
But the threat from the attendance officer about, well, you're gonna have to come in and have a meeting with the administration. And it is so important for parents to be aware and understand. I have learned so much. I've gotten so bold in the last few years of telling them, you know what, you can take us off of this tag. Do not call me when my kids miss school. Do not threaten me because you are serving me. I have a homeschool affidavit, therefore they are not required to be there ever. So quit bugging me about it. And they're like, oh, but even with that, they're like, well, you still might get a call from the administrator. I mean, they do. They play on that fear. And that's what's going on in Provo School District.
It affects their funding. It affects a lot of things. And I think, it's easy just to say all or nothing. And I wish we could just take a closer look and work it out, work it out at the local districts and say, I know my daughter's teachers were more than happy to work with her not taking SAGE tests or other assignment. The issue isn't at the local level. The issue is people millions of miles away deciding they know best for everyone and setting the blanket law and pushing it down. And really, it's the teachers and parents that have to deal with the aftermath, and it's not right.
I disagree with that a little bit because there is a huge issue at our local level. And that is that we have our school boards that have a complete misunderstanding. I talked to several of my school board members and had this conversation with them, that they do not see their role as representing us. They see their role as implementing what comes down, which is exactly.
I had the same experience with when I first started looking into this and the data collection, and every time I go to the district or the school board, they said, well, let's call the USOE, the unelected bureaucracy, and ask them what we have to do. And anyway.
Well, since the federal government has no constitutional right to be involved with state education, as I understand it, why doesn't our state stand up for its own sovereignty? Is it just money?
It's only money at this point. It's only money. And for example, the most recent example is the only thing tying us to Common Core in Utah after we got out of the assessment consortium. We pushed back a lot of things, and the only thing left was a waiver from No Child Left Behind. That it was unconstitutional. So the No Child Left Behind law gave the right to the Department of Education to give states waivers, period. They could waive you having to live up to that. They couldn't set new laws, but that's exactly what they did. The Department of Education came into the states and said, if you will do X, Y, Z, completely new regulations that didn't go through Congress, then we will waive the penalties of No Child Left Behind. Because they were 2014, or that was when all the penalties were supposed to hit from No Child Left Behind, if not 100% of kids weren't proficient. Anyway, and the only funding that they could threaten under No Child Left Behind was the Title I funding. So we had a Stanford mathematician who used to work with the Department of Education. He went through Utah's numbers and he figured out exactly how much money was at stake if we didn't comply with No Child Left Behind. And it was like, it was less than 3% of the total education budget. And Wendy Hart, who is one of the school members, she went through Alpine School Board's budget and said, we have enough money in our rainy day fund right now, today, to cover if we were to lose this Title I funding. But even under No Child Left Behind, it's a couple-year process before they can kick it in. And I went to the hearing on Capitol Hill about that, and none of our state board of education, anyone knew what was going on with that bill. No, it's this way, no, it's this way, no, it's this way. No Child Left Behind is a law that's been on the books for a long time, and still nobody knew how to comply with it or what the true penalties were. But out of fear, we renewed our waiver. We voluntarily sold 100% of our educational sovereignty for less than 5%, or some, I don't know if that's the exact number, but a very small amount of our education funding was on the line, and yet we give all the control away from that. And I think that Senator Henderson is my senator, and they did kind of a fiscal audit. I don't know if some of the representatives here know, but one of the things that she was going to look into was how much it actually costs us to comply with the federal regulations on education versus how much money we get. Because those of us who've done it informally think it's costing us a lot more than we're getting to actually comply with what they are mandating, and I don't think it would be a huge loss if we were able to get out. And those of us, I wish Senator Dayton were here, but she was fighting No Child Left Behind when it first came out, and few people are aware how the federal government strong-armed them over all funding, not just education funding, but the threats come. And it wasn't until years later where someone at the Federal Department of Education admitted, it was in an article recently, I wish I had the reference, but they kind of admitted that if Utah had held its ground at that point and not caved to the funding threats, there's nothing that they could have done. They were sweating it, and we caved. Anyway.